Let us pray. Guide us, Lord, in all our doings with your gracious favor, and further to your continual help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and by your mercy attain everlasting life, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, send forth, we beseech thee, upon thy servants who bear office in this country, the spirit of charity and justice, that they may in all things walk before thee with steadfast purpose and a single heart, and faithfully serve in their several offices, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Most gracious God, author of all good things, we humbly beseech thee for the Parliament of Barbados, especially the Senate at this time assembled, that thou wouldest be pleased to direct and prosper all their counsels to the advancement of thy glory, the good of thy church, and the safety, honor, and welfare of our people. All this we ask in the name of Jesus Christ, our most blessed Lord and Savior. Amen. And we pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forever. Amen.
Amen. The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency, the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor, the President.
Honorable Senators, I have received the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, September 29th, 2021, for confirmation. Senator McConney.
Mr. President, I beg that the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday, September 29th, 2021 be confirmed.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting held on September 29th, 2021 be confirmed. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Who thinks the ayes have it? The minutes stand confirmed. In terms of other announcements, I have excuses for lateness from House Leader Senator Walcott and also from Senator Moore.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay the amendments to the Defense Officers Amendment Regulations 2021 and the Barbados Defense Force Reserve Amendment Regulations 2021. The Civil Aviation Aerodrome Certification Amendment Regulations 2021. The annual report of the Barbados Prison Service for financial year ended 2019. The annual report of the Barbados Investment and Development Corporation for the period April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2021. The instruments adopted by the International Labour Organization P029 Protocol of 2014 to the Forced Labor Convention 1930, R203 Forced Labor Supplementary Measures Recommendation 2014, Transition from the Informal to the Formal Economy Recommendation 2015, Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience Recommendation 2017. Also, the financial statements of the Transport Authority for the year 2019 to 2020.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or sitting of the Senate moved by a minister. Introduction of bills.
Senator McConney.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the resolution to move the passing of a resolution in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 228, to approve the compulsory acquisition by the Crown of a parcel of land situate at Workman's in the parish of St. George in this island for the purpose of constructing recreational facilities for public use.
Public business.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 1, sir.
Order number 1.
In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment number 2 Bill 2021.
Senator McConney.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, Mr. President, I rise to introduce this Constitution Amendment number 2 bill at a time when Barbados is a sovereign nation aspiring to be a free people. And I say that because it is at an intersection when we are to free our own individual minds and that of our collective national psyche as we seek to bridge between the Barbados we have been and our sense of identity to our past and the Barbados we are seeking to become and our vision for the future. Through this bill, Mr. President, we are seeking to advance beyond a British realm as international law would recognize us to be a fully self-governing people with a Barbadian as our head of state. Sir, over the last several weeks and months that this bill has been in circulation and available to the public, there are many notions about what this bill could usher into Barbados. So with your permission, sir, at the outset, I would like to shed some light on the spirit of this bill to reassure the people of this country. Mr. President, we are not here to change our past, as some have sought to suggest. We are here, though, sir, to reimagine our future in the image of a fully self-determined, self-governing, sovereign people. We are not here, sir, to put down the British monarchy. Far from it, sir. We have great respect for the monarchy. But we are here, sir, to elevate Barbados's identity, one that gives our Barbadian children a chance and a choice to be head of state of this country, not as subjects, but as sovereigns. We are not here, Mr. President, to devalue those among us whose ancestors were the masters of the Barbados experiment in colonial rule and the experience of enslavement and exploitation that went with it. We are here, though, Mr. President, to raise up emerging generations of co-creative equals from all walks of life to build a socially just reality for Barbados. Mr. President, there are many who lament and even fear Barbados's proposal to move towards a republic with a Barbadian head of state. I understand, sir, how hard it is to let go mentally and emotionally of the status quo we have known. And for those who believe that the move to a republic will cause them to lose something, I wonder what exactly is it they think that they will lose. What do we fear we will not be able to control? What is it that we want for Barbados's future that we believe will be hampered by our evolution in national identity into republic? Mr. President, many have spoken about what will change. But I want to share a little bit about what will stay the same, because I think it is in sharing some of those elements of things that will remain the same that it will perhaps cause some people to recognize that the disruption they are anticipating is really, as has been attributed, and I have not seen this quote, but I have heard it attributed to Mark Twain when he said, I have had many problems in my life, most of which never happened. We want, sir, what will stay the same, sir, are the foundational structures of our parliament. The difference is that a Barbadian will hold the office of executive head. The Governor General, who acts on behalf of the Queen, holds that office now, and as that office is renamed president, the duties will remain pretty much the same. So many of the duties we would have been accustomed, and the privileges that we would have been accustomed to recognizing as part of the remit of our Governor General will certainly simply become that of the President. The laws that are now the laws of this country, Mr. President, will remain the laws of this country. And they will only be changed through the same parliamentary process to which we are accustomed and in which we are engaged right now, even as part of this debate. What will remain the same too, sir, is the Prime Minister will remain the Prime Minister, much like it is now. Members of Parliament will remain members of Parliament, much like they are now. Ministers and parliamentary secretaries will remain ministers and parliamentary secretaries unless, of course, the will of the Prime Minister changes, and then there's due process for that as well. Our President of the Senate, sir, will remain the President of the Senate and the Deputy and the Speaker of the House of Assembly will remain the Speaker of the House of Assembly, sir. The Leader of the Opposition will remain the Leader of the Opposition, and unless there is some major change, the senators that are part of this honorable House will remain senators as part of this honorable House. The judges, sir, at all levels will remain judges. The chairpersons of constitutionally established commissions and tribunals will remain. Sir, I shared all this to say that as much as people are anticipating a massive disruption in our government, that is not so. And I name these above, Mr. President, because persons who hold the named offices above, they take oaths of various sorts that pledge allegiance to the Queen and her heirs. These oaths are to be changed to pledge allegiance to Barbados. And the first schedule of this constitutional amendment, number 2 bill that's before this honorable chamber, in Schedule 1, lays out the change of oaths. And without my reading the many that are there for the various offices, sir, in every case, they say either allegiance to Barbados, serve Barbados, true loyalty to Barbados, and therefore the allegiance has shifted. That, sir, is one of the changes that will come amidst all of those others before, sir, that I said will remain pretty much the same. Any officer, too, Mr. President, that was appointed under the authority of the Governor General would still remain appointed. This includes public servants. Mr. President, most of what we are familiar with now as part of governance and procedure will remain. This bill is not meant to disrupt, but to evolve specific aspects of our system of governance. The most important proposed changes from this bill, Mr. President, if I may continue, and I think it bears repeating, is that a Barbadian in his or her own right, that means not acting on behalf of anyone else, but in his or her own right, would be permitted by law to hold the office of head of state, and that the term used for head of state would change to president. This bill, too, seeks to revoke the Barbados Independence Order of 1966, but save and keep intact the Constitution, which, as you know, Mr. President, was a schedule to that order made by the British Parliament. There are those who will suggest that in so doing, we are doing an ill to the laws of this country. I will leave that discussion for the lawyers, sir. But I do know, sir, that this government, as is the case, has received the advice of some of the most brilliant minds in the Caribbean, legal minds in the Caribbean. And as it is in law, there are those who will believe one thing and those who will believe another. And of course, sir, the legal perspective will be determined in the fullness of time. I spoke earlier, sir, in terms of significant changes about the continuity of government, that all of those appointments and all of those offices to which we've become accustomed, they will continue. Because as part of this, they will simply be shepherded into the next phase in the life of Barbados. And I also spoke of oaths, sir. I will not repeat that, but of course, that is a significant change. Reference in our law, sir, you will recall that a number of our laws, number of procedures that may be pending before the courts, they name either Her Majesty or the Crown as parties. There are lands and various property that is vested in the Crown. Any particular law or proceeding or transaction or pending matter that refers to Her Majesty the Queen as a party or the Crown will now simply be referred to, will refer to the state as the party instead of Her Majesty or the Crown. References that we will see now, Mr. President, to Governor General in laws and other circumstances will then be changed to refer to the President. As you know, sir, there are many people who are concerned that we will be pulling away from the Commonwealth. And what would that mean? I wish to share, sir, that Barbados, it is our intention at this time to still remain a member of the Commonwealth. the Commonwealth of Nations, or the Commonwealth as we call it for short. That is a voluntary association of former colonies or territories of the British Empire. There are 54 members, sir. And of those 54 members, 33 are already republics. That is just over 61%, close to two-thirds, have already made the transition that Barbados is now seeking to make. 16 of those members are realms. Barbados is considered a realm. Meaning, if I were to use the good old Oxford Dictionary, it speaks of a country ruled by a king or a queen. And 5 members of that Commonwealth have their own monarch. So what Barbados is seeking to do in terms of making its advancement towards a republic, it is not new, it is not unique, and it does not necessarily spell any severance of part of the Commonwealth family. Barbados, in fact, we remain committed to the principles of the Commonwealth, which speaks, and I quote, freely cooperating in the pursuit of peace, liberty, and progress. And, sir, as established by the London Declaration of Heads of Governments of the Commonwealth in 1949, as established, Barbados will remain free and equal, quote, as other member states. And so, Mr. President, Barbados, we believe that we are equal to the task of complete self-governance, and we see ourselves as free to make the choice. This constitutional amendment bill before this Honorable Senate is part of a wider self-declaration of such freedom and equality. Sir, the privilege of free thinking means that there will be people for and there will be people against Barbados's effort to advance towards being a republic with a Barbadian head of state. There are those who understand what it means and why, sir, and there are those who are still coming to a better understanding. And there are those, Mr. President, who will tell you that I don't care one way or the other. And to the latter, sir, even if you do not appreciate the meaning of having a Barbadian head of state for you now, I ask that we shift our minds from our past and look to our future, and let's not rob future generations to come of what this could mean for them. Emerging generations of Barbadians, sir, must claim their space in this ever-changing world, rooted in an evolved Barbadian identity. They must do so aware and respecting our past, but unshackled from the historic institutions that have held them subjects and relate politically to these fields and hills we call our own as realms. The language of subjects and territories and realms, sir, are of a bygone age, and we need to embrace a new language for a new generation. What that language will be, sir, it will emerge from the consultations that this government has committed to have with the public of Barbados as we build out a forward-thinking charter and a new constitution going forward. Through these consultations, we who are declared equal and free as members of the Commonwealth can now think and act as a liberated people. And I encourage all Barbadians to come out in their numbers and participate meaningfully and constructively in the work that will be done in building out their charter and our new constitution. It is part of our democracy. Mr. President, even if I had not understood before what a Barbadian head of state could mean for the future, I understood it, sir, and I permit you to let me tell this story. I understood it more deeply when a few weeks ago I was speaking with my 13-year-old daughter about the Republic and a Barbadian being a head of state. And we talked about her visit, the visit of her school to the Parliament buildings down in Bridgetown, the ones that are now being cleaned and ready for us to occupy yet again. That tour was before COVID and before we vacated those premises to these new locations. And I was talking to her about the Governor General and about the relationship of the Governor General to the Queen. And you know, it is interesting how innocent minds, children who have not yet formed their own political ideologies and really don't sit either here or there in terms of the political conversations we will have. She said to me, "So, Mom, does the Queen make the Governor General tell Barbados what to do?" And I said, "No, it doesn't quite work like that." So trying to simplify it for a child's mind, I said to her, well, Barbados decides, and then we, through the Governor General, we share that message with the Queen, and she usually assents, meaning she will say yes. She says, "So, Mom, if," and this is with no disrespect, sir, I'm just sharing the conversation I had with the child, my daughter. She said, "So if we decide, and we only need the Queen to say yes, why can't we just say yes ourselves? Why can't we just tell ourselves yes?" And it is in those simple 7 words from the mouth of a child who is totally innocent to all of this that I truly understood why I had to stand up in here today and support this. Because she, as a Barbadian by descent, and as we know, the qualification for those who may become president is as a Barbadian by birth or descent. Persons like her now, my daughter Joy, she can now aspire to become the head of state in this country and be part of that shifted mindset and that shift in our national psyche that says, yes, it's okay for us to tell ourselves yes. Mr. President, the President, as identified in this bill, will be elected, will be an elected position. And this bill specifies very clearly how that election would happen. Some people have asked, well, will the people of Barbados go to the polls and elect the president? The answer to that is no. There is a process that is here where there is a nomination. The intention is that that nomination will be a joint nomination between the Prime Minister and leader of the opposition would come together, make that nomination, and if that nomination is accepted by both houses, both the lower house and the upper house, the Senate and the House of Assembly, that the process then for the election of that mutually agreed nominee could go forward. Mr. President, it is intended, sir, many people ask how will this transition happen? Before I get there, sir, I do want to, if I may, with your permission, mention that it has been said in the other place that there is some agreement at this stage, perhaps between the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, that there is a nominee on which they agree. Our current Governor General, who, if once the process is followed, could well become the next president of this country. Or, well, I shouldn't say the next, I should say the first president of this country. The intention is that the term would be for 4 years initially, and that in the event that there is further agreement, that that term could be renewed for up to another 4 years at this time. Mr. President, there is also a provision in this bill, and it is very explicit in terms of how a president may be removed. And it is not at all a light or a slight process. Again, it requires that there be agreement. It requires that there be legal minds from outside of Barbados who would, in fact, be sitting to hear any case, I shouldn't say case, but any circumstance that has been brought against the Governor General, if that is one of the bases on which the Governor General could be removed. And they will, of course, hear the circumstances, and then, of course, we will have to come back to the Houses, and the Houses will then have to give their approval. And I'm talking about the Houses of Parliament here of this country. It is possible also that a president may leave office because they resign. A president may also leave office because their term has expired. So in this bill, there are some very specific conditions under which the president may either leave office or be removed from office. And again, there is a rigorous process on every level to ensure that no prime minister or no single individual or authority can do so without transparency, without accountability, and without the approval of the Parliament. Sir, I know that there are many who wish to speak on this bill, and I shall certainly say that there are moments in our history that we will celebrate united, where all of us agree, and there are moments that we will lament as divided people where we do not agree. There are moments when we are going to be proud, sir, and there are moments when we will be ashamed about the part we play in the story as we develop and evolve as a country. Sir, enslavement happened, and so did emancipation. I would say that the right to vote was denied to a majority, Mr. President, and now we celebrate that same right to vote as being universal, available to all. Colonization happened, Mr. President, and so did independence. The point, sir, is that we have flowed between lamentation and celebration over the years as our Barbados has evolved and emerged on the right side of justice in the fullness of time. And sir, it is on this note that I beg to move that this bill be read a second time and invite the debate of this honorable House.
Thank you very much, Senator McConney. Senator Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am humbled and intimidated by what is happening here today. And I will start by referring to something the acting leader said, that people are afraid of Barbados becoming a republic. That's some people. Well, if there are any persons in Barbados who listen to me and believe anything that I say, I want to tell them there is nothing to fear. Barbados, for all intents and purposes, is almost a republic right now. And let me read for you the definition of republic. It says, a republic is a state in which the supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and which has an elected or nominated president rather than a king or a queen. That is all a republic really is. So we're not going, because there are a few republics around the world that go and find themselves in torment and whatever, say that will happen to Barbados. It will not. That is not what we need to fear. There are things that we will fear, or we should fear, but becoming a republic is not one of them. There's an essay that I came back across when I was doing my research for this thing. So, and if you'll permit me, I'll read some sections of it. And it starts by quoting a former member of this place, Senator Asper Phillips. And he was speaking on the bill to abolish the celebration for Guy Fawkes Day, which used to be November 5th, where we had fireworks and stuff. That's when a guy called Guy Fawkes wanted to blow up the parliament.
You're dating yourself, Senator Franklin.
I used to like what bombs
those
to
of us
think
of
like
a
everybody
certain
else.
vintage know of Guy Fawkes Day.
I used to like what bombs too.
I remember as a boy.
You know, and some person once said that, and I hate to say it, but they said that one of the few people that entered Parliament with honest intent was Guy Fawkes. You know, and I don't share that because I have honest intent. I'm sure most of us do. But I'll read. He says, they have no national pride, and as far as they are concerned, they will take English traditions and habits with them to their graves. Senator Asper Phillips. The writer of the essay goes on to say, until now, I have not expressed any public views on the pros and cons of Barbados becoming a republic. This was an essay from 2000. I have listened to the raging debate. Quite frankly, I had great difficulty understanding why right-thinking Barbadians would want to retain the British monarch as head of state of Barbados at the dawn of the 21st century. This was a 2000 article. Especially when there are no real or apparent benefits for so doing. After 34 years of political independence, you could only sympathize with those Barbadians who are somewhat reluctant to embrace psychological independence. It would appear that the brainwashing perpetrated against non-white peoples by the British colonizers is still deeply entrenched in our national psyche. Over centuries, non-white people were subjected to such conditioning as the following. They were intellectually inferior to the European, that they were incapable of representative government, among other things. Our people have imbibed, this is what they imbibed those racist views to the extent that they develop a need to hold on to the illusionary security blanket of the British monarchy. And he went on to quote some very racist things that people were saying about black people. But I wouldn't quote all of them because it's fairly long. It says, I'll leave out those quotes, and it says, the institution of slavery has left deep psychological scars on the descendants of both slave and master. In 1966, some of those who felt superior opted to leave these shores for New Zealand and Australia rather than live in an independent Barbados ruled by the descendants of slaves. I believe that retaining the British monarch as the ceremonial head of state gave comfort to those with the racist view of black people. It created or allowed to flourish the perception that we still needed legitimacy from Britain. I'm grateful to the that Prime Minister Owen Arthur has recognized the need to raise the Barbadian self-esteem and the courage to attempt to give the process a much-needed boost. It is time for this inferiority complex to be conquered. It can only be done when we see ourselves as good as anyone else. Independence with Queen Elizabeth as the head of state was a necessary first step to assert our Barbadian identity. The next step is to take on all the trappings of nationhood and have a Barbadian as head of state. So this essay was written by Warren Caswell Franklin and was published in the newspaper on the 11th of November 2000.
Thank you for that very clear reference for the record.
Thank you, John. Those views have not changed, and they are not likely to change. I believe with all my heart and all my brain, or whatever you believe it, that we should have been a republic long ago. And we were talking about 2000 when this debate was raging. But then something happened, and it took a back seat until now. This is where I have the problem. From 2000, nothing happened, and then 2021, we rushed to get this thing on the books with indecent haste. That is what I have problems with, and I think most right-thinking people would have problems with it. Some people express the view that we should have a head of state where the people voted for that person. I'm one of those. Because look how Parliament is configured now. We have 29 in the lower house, and in this place they have 12 government senators. There is nowhere on God's earth that the Prime Minister's choice can be defeated in this kind of configuration. That's why I think the people should have their say on it. But others, including my leader, thinks not. And I will have to go with the majority because I think I'm going to be sticking out as a sore thumb. I still believe that. But the fear that we are talking about, what should be fear? Are those who govern the republic and not the republic itself. The republic itself can't do anybody anything. Right now we are seeing efforts to transform Barbados to be a republic, but a special kind of republic. It is a BLP republic, or rather a motley republic. It is obvious to any objective person that the government is remaking this country to benefit the Barbados Labour Party, for electoral benefit of, I should say. But how is the government doing so? The government is ignoring constitutional conventions, long established constitutional conventions, which form part of the Westminster system that we are modeled from. Examples, and I can give a more recent example. We just had where a minister said to the Barbados today, he knows nothing about a permanent secretary in his ministry writing to AstraZeneca. At that point in time, that minister is gone, or the permanent secretary should go. But both shouldn't stay. It says that he's not in control of his ministry. But if we are going to have this republic, we should have it on the highest standards, highest ethical standard. And that minister should have said, I'm not in control of my ministry. Because let me tell you something. A permanent secretary will be completely out of order to issue a document like that unless she got it from her minister or somebody senior to that minister. I say no more. But he should resign. I've not heard him or heard or seen that he's taken any steps to rein in this permanent secretary who stepped down the wicket with bat in the air. Wicketkeeper got ball in the hand and would not stump her. I don't understand it. But you're going to ask, is this irrelevant to this debate? Yes, it is. It is speaking to the type of republic that we are going to emerge into. You know? We want a republic where elected officials do the honorable thing. When I bought another article here, I'm not going to, it was written by the same author, the last one. So I'm not going to read it for you, but it spoke to a guy called John Profumo, who couldn't go and tell the world, yeah, I got a mistress. And he said no. He said it to Parliament. He had to resign when he did have one. So I'm going to say to you guys, if you have one, tell them, I'm not answering that question. You won't be lying. But just something as simple as that. All right? But how are we also going to make this a motley republic? We are having a situation now where the public service is supposed to be permanent and the politicians are temporary because they're going 5-year cycles. The reason for that is that a civil servant should give advice, honest, professional advice to whoever forms the government. But if you put those same senior civil servants on contract, they will give the advice that the minister wants to get the contract renewed. And that is what I'm fearing. So we are shaping this country into something that is undesirable. So it is not a republic that is undesirable. It is what we are doing to this country to make it undesirable. Again, we are creating parallel institutions in this country when we already have and staffing them with politicians. The Department of Public Affairs, it has basically taken over the role of the GIS and been staffed with, for the most part, party faithfuls, which is contrary to the way public service posts are supposed to be filled. The Public Service Act sets out where they are supposed to be filled, and the Act says that this Act applies to permanent and temporary offices. So even though there are temporary offices and temporary posts created by Prime Minister, there is a provision where they go through a service commission. That wasn't done. So it don't fear the republic, fear who is manning the republic. That is the problem. Then we also now have a situation where the government don't want dissenting voices. I will not call names, but I will only say, just recently we bought off a talk show host. Keep him quiet because he used to keep too much noise. He's a loss to public debate in Barbados. A big loss. But he's silent.
Senator Franklin.
Yes, sir.
I listen to you very carefully, and you know that you cannot impute improper motives to members of either house. And the notion of buying off someone could only be improper. You'll withdraw that imputation and continue.
Yes, I thank you for your guidance, sir. And I withdraw the buying off. But I can't find a suitable synonym, so I will leave it. But then if I get $15,000 for doing something that he's not qualified for, and he's no longer being the voice of the people, mind you, he's not a dog. But sir, my paucity of language, I can't find a word, so I will leave it at that. Then right now, sir, also, we are trying to create a police force in this new republic that we have, where we have 2 pensioners, geriatrics now, remaining at the top of the police force when they should be gone. because the law does not allow them to stay beyond 67. And if they have vacation leave, they must take that vacation leave so that when they leave the public service, all our leave is gone. That cannot happen now. But we are doing that because we want to create this thing in our image. Our image meaning the BLP's image. We've just done it for the Defense Force. We put somebody in place who is favorable. No, you must trust the people, and if you don't trust them and they're doing the wrong thing, bring charges against them and get rid of them. But don't bring your friends. That is the making of a republic. A banana republic. That is what we are seeking to do here. I said, don't get me wrong, sir. I support Barbados becoming a republic. I want Barbados to become a republic. But I don't like the indecent haste that this thing has taken. The Prime Minister just the other day decided she is going to bring Barbados to Republican status on the 30th of November. Again, I think that was not properly thought out. Because we have examples in the Caribbean, where Trinidad and Guyana, they have separate days. Independence Day and then Republic Day. As a matter of fact, in Trinidad, Republic Day is the first day that Parliament sat as a republic. First session is that day, so that day is marked. And Independence Day is left by itself. But that is not what we are doing in Barbados. We have, and I hope I'm misjudging the Prime Minister when I said that this is a way to get Barra out of independence. Because some years ago, Barra has said, he had some opposition from a guy called Motley in the city. And Barra abolished local government and said if he can't get Motley out of the city, he's going to get the city out of Motley. Now Motley's granddaughter is getting, I can't say revenge, but she's going to get...
Senator Franklin, let us keep the debate at a high standard.
So
there are matters for when you mount your platform in any available spot in Barbados, and there are matters for the Senate in this debate. You cannot impute improper motives to a member in the other place concerning the choices made of dates and circumstances. You just can't do that according to the rules, Senator Franklin. You'll withdraw that imputation and move on.
Sir, you wouldn't let me finish because I was saying that she was going to get Barra out of independence. But you're saying that is out of order, and I am going to agree with you, and I'm going to move on.
I would tell that in the spirit of humor, but you know that you said enough to know that we all heard what you said. You cannot make those imputations.
And I agree with you, sir. But after some pushback, government then decided, we're going to have, you've made the dates, you decided what form the republic is going to take. And then after some pushback from people, we heard, we're going to have a Republican advisory committee headed by a person who is a central banker, who's an economist, but coincidentally, whose maiden name is Motley. That might be significant. But I'm trying to wrap my head around how to say it without offending the chair. So I'm not going to say it at all. I'm just leaving it out there for everybody who wants to think on that, to think on it. That committee has not reported yet, but we have 3 drafts of amendments to the Constitution, three drafts. And to show that they're rushing them and not doing it properly, the first draft is on the 20th of September. Then the next draft is the 27th of September. And then the next draft is the 28th. Why can't we just spend the time and do one draft and circulate it in this country among the people, one draft of a constitution? Because, sir, I have so much difficulties with this bill. It boggles the mind. Republican status for this country is a momentous occasion, and it should not be done in a piecemeal manner by amending the old British Constitution that was bequeathed to us. We want to throw off the yoke of colonialism, that word drives me up, but by taking that piece of colonial legislation and passing it up to suit our purposes. Government should be embarrassed to do this. It's shameful. We should have drafted our own constitution. You know, instead of having this, our own homemade constitution, instead of having this hodgepodge of English legislation and amendments that were taken from the Barbados Independence Order. None of it is ours. Do we have any national pride? They have no national pride, Osgood Phillips says. And it seems as though we just want to get a job done, and we don't care how we do it. But there are certain niceties that you should conform to. We should have a Republican Constitution, drafted by our people, for our people, accepted by our people, and adopted by our people. Instead, our Republican status is coming out of a British document that we are trying to leave behind. Barbados was granted independence by an act of the British Parliament in 1966. The Barbados Independence Act of 1966. That is a British act. In that act, at section 5, I have it here somewhere. I'm not even going to read it. At section 5, it gives the Queen the power to give Barbados a constitution. So the Queen did that by making the Barbados Independence Order, 1966, this document. And the schedule to that document is, excuse me, sir, is the Barbados Constitution. A document that has never been passed in our Parliament. We should have a Barbados Constitution Act that we can all subscribe to. I would be very happy to be voting on the Barbados Constitution Act. Instead, we are voting on amendments to our Constitution, which up to now is a schedule to the Barbados Independence Order. By section 4 of this piece of legislation that we have here, the government is doing some fancy footwork. Clause 4 says, Constitution of Barbados, the independence order is revoked. They mean the Barbados Independence Order is revoked, but they didn't say that here. But the revocation of that order shall not affect the validity of the Constitution set in the schedule to that order. I'm not going to go on the road with legal purists saying, or I agree with them, that if you repeal a document, the schedule goes. And we should repeal the document. We should repeal the Barbados Independence Act. We should have our own document. But subclause 2 says, the Constitution referred to in subsection 1 shall be altered in accordance with the provisions of section 49 thereof. in the manner and to the extent set out in this act. And on the appointed day, the Constitution so altered shall become the Constitution and supreme law of Barbados. That is a backdoor, backhand method of passing the Constitution in Barbados. Nobody even know that you're passing that what we are doing today is actually passing a Barbados Constitution. We're not only doing amendments to the Barbados Constitution that was granted to us in England. What we are doing is to pass a Constitution, because without the independence order, our Constitution can't stand. But the British Barbados Independence Order, without that, our Constitution cannot stand. So you are telling me that you have no national pride, and you have come about this procedure by putting a few little bells and whistles on our Constitution, the Constitution that came from England, and calling it ours. No, that's bad. We have enough legal minds. I hear people talking about all the legal minds that we have in Barbados, and you don't think that they could come up with a Constitution for Barbados? That we got to go back and amend the order. When we got the first draft of this Constitution Amendment Bill, I started reading. I say, you know something? I read this here before, but I couldn't have read it before because I thought I was having one of those moments where I was being clairvoyant and saying, there's something wrong here. And then I went in my box, my old documents, and I pulled out the Barbados Independence Order. And you have actually taken the Barbados Independence Order from Britain and put it as an amendment, and put some of the clauses into the Barbados Constitution, and now calling it ours. You know, only in law you can do that, you know, because any other field of endeavor, they would call it plagiarism. How dare we do something like this? You know, you said we ain't got no pride. It boggles my mind. You know, I'm one of those people who would love to stand up and be counted as one of the people who support Barbados becoming an independent republic. But the process that we have undertaken is flawed. They are passing it today, and the committee that's supposed to be doing this thing ain't even report yet. Because we know what we wanted to do. It is not what the will of the people, it's the will of one person. And so when you come and you make these little gets back, and so the people, okay, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and the Governor General was like, even that was a come back. Because people are saying you want to get with the Governor General. So she said, okay, let me avoid that, and we said it. I'm grateful, and I would want to be one of those people who support the current Governor General as president. But I don't want to do it in a flawed process. The process is flawed. I have such problems with this legislation. You know, it is essentially what the British did for Barbados in 1966. Cold soup, warm over. There's nothing new. It isn't speaking to this is who we are. No, we are not British. We are imitating and going and adopting what the British did for us. And we are saying, well, if that's what we want, why become a republic? Because you're still using the British Constitution that they gave us. With some minor amendments, the amendments taken from the British, but the Barbados Independence Order that was also given by the British. Mr. President, want to see Barbados as a republic. I want to see, but I wanted to see the patriot, what the Canadians call patriot their constitution, because their system was even worse than ours. If they had in the constitutional amendment, they had to go to England to get it approved. But they did a constitution act, and they said they patrioted their constitution. We are not patrioting our constitution. We are taking the British constitution that they gave us and making some minor amendments to it and saying that that will suffice. That is not who I think we should be, or I don't think that's who we are. I think Bajans have a lot of pride, and there's nothing to be proud about in this process. So, unfortunately, I cannot support the legislation that is so flawed. I want a republic, but not at all costs, not at the cost of me denying myself the pride that we speak about, pride in industry. There's no pride in this. You know, it was like, having gone through these documents, it looks as though Britain is granting us republic status. On the face of these documents, that's what it looks like. That's not what we want. We want to stand up in the world and say to people, we have arrived. We are taking our independence on our own. We don't need it from you or anybody else. But you can't do it with the people document. I don't understand why more people are not speaking out this process. Or forget, some of them used to be on the calling program, they can't speak up now. But I'm not going to say he was bought, sir. I remember you quite clearly, so I can't do that. But whoever else, if you include people, every time someone has a dissenting view, you include them. So as such, you don't get the richness that of anything that we as a people can come together and decide, yes, this is our own thing, this is how we want it. Because this should be done by people having a say. The Barbadians didn't have a say. At least this Barbadian didn't have a say. I don't have a say on what should be in the Constitution. As a member of the public, this Constitution should have been circulated and let the people say aye or nay. You know the definition for republic that I spoke about earlier. It says, power is held by the people and their elected representatives. The people don't have any power. The elected representatives, sir, I can say usurp. Usurp the power of the people and come and bestowing this Constitution on us. The Barbadians are not idiots. We are a thinking people. We should be able to say to the government, will you come up with, don't make a lot of sense to us, and give your views and have it debated in public. That debate in public, now after we have this act passed and we making procedures with name of head of state, Barbadian head of state, you are now going to have a committee reporting back to tell you what Barbadians is saying you should be getting that information first. And having gotten that information, then you put after those town hall meetings but you don't have town hall meetings, no, you have them on TV. I see a good senator there on TV, biting his tongue, answering people's questions, because sometimes the questions are difficult, because they cannot justify what they're doing as sensible. Mind you, that was only one occasion, because I really don't watch them. It's too heart-wrenching. And the heart, you know, I've got to protect it. So when I see these things happening on TV, I only manage to see them when I go by my mother, and her TV is on. Because I don't watch TV otherwise. But what I see, you know, the one I saw, it had a situation where I think the panel was not fit for the task. Just like you have a chairman who's fit for central banking, and now she's chairing a constitutional commission that deals with laws. But she's a motley. So you have to get it from that source. I didn't know that, you know. I just have this devious mind. And one day I said, let me do a little checking here. And I went and Googled the person's name. And when I Googled the person's name, it says she was born Motley. I said, is there a connection? And if there's a connection, why? And I, sir, but I can't go further because of the attributing improper motives. So I will, I say, you're teaching me, you know, and I learn, and so I have to finish there. But sir, that process is flawed. It is backwards. Government still got some time to say to Barbados, we got it wrong, but they're not. Too much false pride. And you got it wrong. That national pride that we talk about rings hollow when the prayer that this government is too lazy to get it done correctly, get it done right the first time. As a matter, mind you, this is a government that gets it wrong most times at the first and then seek to undo the damage that they've done. But this Republican Constitution is too important to be doing it in that kind of manner. I am opposed to the bill itself. I am not opposed to Barbados becoming a republic. As a matter of fact, I will be championing it. But the process, sir, is flawed, and government by now, somebody should tell out there on the other side, should be telling the government, look, telling each other, man, this thing wrong. Don't let me go down this road. But gonads are in short supply over there. And it is her way or no way.
Don't go there, Senator.
Sorry about that. Then if you don't want me to go there, I wouldn't. But I wouldn't go there, sir. But you know, these things come to my mind as I try to be parliamentary, and I have to fight it.
Please do.
But I'll get there eventually. But sir, in all honesty, in all sincerity, I love this country. I want to see things done correctly around here. And too many things are going awry in this place because we are not taking the time to consult with the people, to consult with the governed. This is not a dictatorship. And even with the Constitution, the country becoming a republic, it won't be a dictatorship. We are not proposing anything like that. All we are saying is, or all I am saying is, we should have our own constitution, drafted by us, but input from us, for us. But we did this. Sir, I'm ashamed of the government for putting Barbados through this process. It is flawed. It doesn't make sense. And nobody wants to come back. And again, even less want to come back, no, because they say so. But why couldn't we be a republic next year? And get everything right the first time. You know, after we do this and Barbados becoming a republic, after this bill is signed into law, we still gotta want to fix it. And then do a constitution. Why don't do it first? Do it one time. And show up the world that Barbados is punching above its weight and we can do things right. Sir, I'm much obliged to you. I'm hurt, but I'm obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. It's on to Senator Greenwich.
Mr. President, I
Agree with Senator Franklin.
no, I'm not talking Senator Franklin at all. I want to begin by saying that our Constitution, the one which we should not be using, according to the last speaker, is a Constitution that has served us well, has served us very, very well. We have, from time to time, amended that Constitution wherever we thought it necessary to do so, and Barbadians can be assured that this country has perhaps one of the best constitutions in the world. Sir, I have heard some arguments this morning that they have surprised me. One of the arguments which I heard is that we are trying to upstage the legacy of the Right Honorable Errol Walton Barrow, and that Republic Day should be a day in itself and Independence Day a day in itself. Sir, if that had been done, you wouldn't hear the end of it. And I know who would lead the charge in the attack. I know who would lead the charge in the attack. If, sir, the Prime Minister had even suggested that Republic Day was on her day or her grandfather's birthday, I know who would lead the charge of it. You wouldn't hear the end of it. But, sir, what has been done here is that November the 30th will still be Independence Day. And November 30th, sir, is a date already owned. That's the date that is sewn up. That is Independence Day. We are not calling November 30th Independence Day and Republic Day. We are not doing it. November 30th will always be Independence Day. That is something owned by the father of our independence. And this particular bill, sir, will not dilute. It will not dilute the contribution which the Right Honorable Errol Walton Barrow made to this country.
Right, excellent.
The Right Excellence, sir. If anything, sir, it will amplify it. it will amplify it. It is the same day. In other words, you have completed your journey. Right, excellent. You have completed your journey. This is all we are doing. It does not dilute it in the least. Recognition is still his. Sir, I want to say here too that certain debates really and truly should be non-partisan. I believe so that this is one such a debate. I firmly believe that this should be a cordial debate. I feel, sir, that there should be no need for us to insult each other in a debate like this one. This should not be a bullfight type of debate. The tone of the debate in this chamber today should be one of dignity, where the language that we use should be measured. Because, sir, whether we like it or not, there are times when partisanship should take a back seat. And the government and the opposition should sing from the same hymn sheet. This is one such occasion. And therefore, sir, I was extremely taken aback when I heard statements such as, I don't fear the Republic. I fear who is manning the Republic. When I heard that someone bought off, well, that word is out now, a talk show host. I heard the description that it is a motley. Sir, I felt bad, sir. I felt bad for myself. I felt bad for the Senate. I felt bad for the Senate. I felt bad for the person speaking too, sir. Sir, I heard about 2 geriatrics at the head of the police force who should be gone. This is not the debate for that type of thing. It certainly was not. I heard about bringing friends, and this is a banana republic. Sir, this is not the debate. This is not the place for that debate. Not in here. Not at this time. I also want, sir, to put the minds of Barbadians at ease. And I want to say that Barbadians can have faith and confidence in the process which has been used and which we intend to continue using for us to reach where we have. There are certain questions which arose, certain legal matters, and I just want to comment briefly on them. There's a question asked, and I do believe it was asked by the leader of the opposition as well. Does our Barbadian Parliament have the legal authority to remain here in Barbados and revoke that 1966 order which was made by the British Parliament? Barbadians can feel confident and comfortable with the process being used. Because the answer to that question, sir, is found first of all in the Barbados Independence Act, which was mentioned. And Section 5 of that act says that the Barbados legislation can alter the provisions of that same order. In other words, we have the authority to alter. And so it goes on to say that by alter, they may not merely amend or modify, but Barbados is also allowed to revoke with or without enactment. So we can stay here where we are, and we can do something to that order which will have repercussions elsewhere. Sir, paragraph 3 of the first schedule of the same Barbados Independent Act, that states that the legislature of Barbados shall have full power to make laws which are extraterritorial in power. So we can stay here and we can make the law, and it would, because you see, at that time, what Britain was doing was allowing a lot of the colonies, they were bending over backwards to allow the colonies to have their independence. So they were doing it. Singapore and Malaysia and all those were allowed, and they had the same arrangement as we have. We are not anybody special. We had the same arrangement. So the same attachment with the Constitution onto the order, so many of the colonies had it. It isn't funny. And nobody in those colonies, the only person who has ever have made a noise about this is the one person I've heard. All the other countries, all the other territories had a similar setup and made no problem, no noise about it. One fella in the whole world made noise about it. One fella. Sir, so as a result of that particular section, I said we can stay at home and we can legislate to deal with the order in council as we see fit. Barbados has therefore the legal authority to remain in Barbados and revoke. So the second question which arose was whether the order in council can be revoked. The same order in council to which the Constitution was attached, whether that can be revoked and the Constitution saved. And the order in council itself said, or says, can look at it, that the Barbados order can be revoked and that the revocation shall not affect the operation on or after the appointed day of any law made by Barbados. So what we are dealing with, and we have to go into all the technicalities, we are dealing with revoke and repeal and save, revoke and save, whatever we want to call it. You can, right now, for instance, if you have the Urban Development or the Rural Development Commission, and they say that in order for this commission to work, you need to have a board. You may have the schedule where the board, it says the board comprises this, and that. In a situation like that, yes, the schedule will fall with the act. It can't exist without it. But this is an occasion where we are saying that we can keep the Constitution, the schedule, but we don't want anything to do with the order. So revoke the order and we keep the Constitution. Sir, now, in order to make assurance even doubly sure, I heard counsel quoting just now from the section 4 of the bill. I don't even know if I have it to hand quickly. Because this was just a matter of trying to make assurance doubly sure. And yeah, I have it. It says that, remember that the order itself had already said you can do it. So I'm saying that this now is on top of that. This now says, here in this particular piece of legislation that we're dealing with today, it says the independence order is revoked. The order said it could revoke me already. And it goes on to say, almost in the identical language, but the revocation of that order shall not affect the validity of the Constitution. that is settled in the what is it? And I am telling you that that is what we are doing. Revoking, but we are keeping. And the other thing is that we have always known that is a principle in law, because once the Governor General assents to this particular piece of legislation, that you can't challenge the procedure. You know, when this passes, this too will be part of the law. So the other thing too, sir, and I think I've hinted at it already, is that one of the main things that we have to observe in all this is that the schedule to the order, that which is the Constitution, it does not depend on the order for its life. Like how I said that the Urban Development Commission, that schedule might very well depend on the statute for its life. It doesn't depend on it. It is a schedule which is not at all subordinate to the order of the Constitution. Even though it is the schedule, sir, that order can stand alone on its own. That is what makes it so crisp, you know. Because this is an order that can stand alone on its own feet. We could just strip up and it doesn't at all affect the Constitution. Doesn't affect it. It has the ability to act. That's why we can get it, keep it as our own. And that Constitution, as I said at the beginning, has served us so well. And now we're being asked and being told that we should draft a new one. We have done so many amendments to that same Constitution that it is already our own Constitution. We know we have a few more things to do on it, but it is already our own, the number of amendments and so on that we have made to that Constitution. A Constitution which can be understood from beginning to end without reliance on the order. We have a freestanding document here, a freestanding document, a document that is Barbados specific, you know, a document that is Barbados specific already. We should draft the own, just for the sake of argument, just to holler hard. Sir, let me tell you, I went through this thing too. And I looked at the persons who had a hand in this. And I want to make this point, that I prefer to sync with persons such as Justice Sherman Moore. I prefer to sync with persons like Ms. Shirley Bell. I prefer to sync with Sir David Simmons. I prefer to sync with Sir Dennis Byron than to swim with the person I hear talking. Sir, I want to make a few other comments, sir, on this matter.
You will drown.
He bored as this 6 years old, he was swimming. So when I look at the oath that so many people have spoken about, that oath of allegiance which politicians, which we now take, you know, it is an oath in which we say that we are going to be faithful and we are going to be obedient. We are going to be dutiful. We are going to be loyal. We are going to be devoted and unwavering towards the Queen of England and to her heirs and her successors and so on. Sir, when we take that oath, you know, that might have been okay when we were a colony. But sir, once we became independent, I do believe that that oath became inappropriate. That oath is the essence, really, of being a colony. This is what being a colony is about. Because that oath in itself tells you who is in charge, and it tells you whose dictates you have to follow. But sir, as I said, once we became an independent country, and you were reciting that oath, sir, there was something about it that smacks of imperfection, it smacks of misguidance, it smacks of misunderstanding. And if you were not confused by it when you were a colony, certainly after independence and you hear that oath, you are confused. And if you aren't confused, then something is wrong with you. Now, we have been reciting that oath, Mr. President, ad nauseum. Every time there's something on, every time you have to recite that oath. You are like a stuck record. And you swear allegiance to Her Majesty and her heirs and successors and so on. And since independence, sir, we have remained like a ship at anchor. And we should have been sailing on, that's the truth. But we're stuck. And we only have ourselves to blame for our delay in making wrong things right. That oath should have been changed shortly after independence. But, like a lot of other things, there's been a lot of lip service paid to the idea of our being a republic. And I'm not saying this in a political way, because both parties that run this country, both parties are guilty. Too long. We waited too long after 1966 to become a republic. I would believe, sir, that about 1975 or thereabouts would have been the ideal time for us to do this. But we seem to have fallen victim to procrastination and what I would call dithering. And therefore, sir, I give the Prime Minister full marks for the very business-like way in which she don't the thing like the choice, not matter choice. If you don't know me yet, boy, you'll never know me. Yeah. So in ensuring that this thing comes to fruition, I think it shows that she at least one thing is that she's doing something. And I would say, sir, that thankfully there will be a new oath for the Prime Minister, there'll be a new oath for the ministers, the parliamentary secretary, judges, and so on. I'm very happy about that. That allegiance will now be sworn not to the Queen, but to the state. Now, at this stage, when we are merely having a Barbadian appointed as head of state, I still think that we have a few amendments to make to the Constitution. Because when you are amending the Constitution, you do so in one of three ways, which would be you either delete something from it, you add something to it, or you modify it. And we have a few things that we have to do. One of the things we have to do is that whenever mention is made in the Constitution about the Queen or the Queen, that it is now going to be the state. So we have to change that to meet police force. I understand that's going to be changed to meet the police service. And there are other changes as well. But the fact of the matter is that we have to bring the Constitution now in line with being a republic. And we have to eliminate all of those things where there will be contradictions, and so on in the Constitution. We have to get those early. And eventually, as we have heard from Senator McConney, there is going to be a full-fledged discussion on our post-republic constitution. One thing which Barbadians can be assured is that the individual rights of citizens will not be affected in any way by the changes which we make. So we can be very happy and very comfortable with that. Sir, I am saying that Barbados has to keep up with the times. And I am sure that even the British, the English people, that they do not expect adult Barbados to wear the same small colonial diaper, if there's such a thing, as we wore when we were babes. When we were babes, we could be that one, it might fit. But they do not expect us to behave that way now. We have matured. And I do believe, sir, that the British people are expecting us to do precisely what we are about today. They expect us to make the change. There is no spite against them. There's no bad feeling. They expect it. They anticipate it. But ironically enough, it would appear to me as though we have some Barbadians who are skeptical about making this obvious step. They don't see it as our country coming full circle. They don't see it as completing our independence journey, but they want to make a political statement. That's all there is to it. And Senator McCauley made the point this morning, too, that being a republic does not mean that we have broken ties with England, ties with Britain. And as she said, we will still be part of the Commonwealth. We are not running away from the British Commonwealth. I myself have had the pleasure of attending about 4 Commonwealth Games. I went to Winnipeg, Canada. I went to England itself to the Commonwealth Games. I went to Malaysia. Remember those well. And I can tell you, sir, that those games are massive. They are big, big games. They are second only to the Olympics. And they're second only to the Olympics because there are more than 50 countries taking part in those games. They are big, big games. And in those games, many of the countries which are competing, there are countries that are now republics, but they were former colonies of Britain. And there are more than 30 republics and so on there competing at those games. Sir, and the British go further, the royal family is always well represented at those games. The one in Malaysia, the one in Canada, always well represented. And it is not that we are speaking to y'all are republics and we don't, they're always there. And, well, I remember being introduced to Mr. Austin Seeley, introduced me to Prince Andrew. He was the chaperone of him in Malaysia. I met Prince Andrew. I sat 2 away from Princess Anne at another one. It's right there with you. So it's not that, you're running away from them and so forth. The other argument I'm hearing from 1 or 2 people is that tourism is going to suffer. Let me tell you all something. The British people do not come here to see the Governor General. No, the British people don't come to Barbados to see the Governor General. That she's the Queen Rep and we come here just no. A change in Governor General will not at all negatively impact our country's arrival from Britain. The experiences on this rock, the experiences here will not change when we become a republic. the cave, the sea, oysters will be the same tomorrow as they were yesterday. They're not going to change. Barbados is not the first place to become a republic after becoming independent. And the ones who did it, they have not suffered. So I don't know why Barbados should suffer. That particular argument, sir, that I hear people saying that we are making a big mistake because tourism is going to suffer. That's a baseless, very baseless argument. Because even now that people come to Barbados from Britain, they do not even know if we are a republic or not. Even now, this very minute that they come from England, they don't know. If you ask them when they reach here, is Barbados, they don't know, but they're still here. That is a baseless argument. So, Mr. President, you and I know that, as I said, tourists don't come to Barbados. You know, it has absolutely nothing to do with being a republic. And I can also say that I do believe that at the end of this exercise, the same gracious Barbadian who was the Queen's representative as head of state will be the same Barbadian who will become our first president. I do believe that. So where is the difference? You know, where is the difference? Where is the difference? This whole thing, you know, is people talking about the tourism and all this. This is only there to criticize and to oppose. You believe, no, I have heard it. I have heard it. In fact, sir, I could tell you that there's a particular person who I heard that argument from that was very much for independence, very much for republicanism. And when Mr. Stewart, last Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, when he spoke about it, they were for it. But now that it is being handled by this present Prime Minister, they're against it. That is my experience. And I know what I'm talking about. Because I've learned that as long as it appears as though this particular party might get 1 or 2 kudos for introducing this measure, that there's some on the other side who will make a roundabout turn and oppose it because they can't bear to see this particular administration score political point. And they will oppose it even if there is nothing at all to oppose. And the next argument, which I shouldn't even mention this one, the same person who made the argument about tourism, this is an argument that I heard from him as well. You know, I never even know that this particular argument existed until I heard him argue this point. He's arguing that becoming a republic will cause the Barbados dollar to devalue. That's an argument that I'm hearing too. I mean, that is an absurd argument. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, it is a non-existent argument. And my way of arguing with him, I didn't spend time to argue the point and so on. I simply asked him, I said, bring proof that will happen. I said, how can being a republic cause a devaluation? Tell me something, bring proof, talk to me. I tell him, what is it that causes a country's dollar to be devalued? I tell him, give me a few examples of countries whose dollar have been devalued because they became republic. I was waiting for about 20 minutes for him to give me an answer. Up to now, I didn't get the answer yet, and I came along. I left it. But as I said earlier, sir, this is an argument that should be a political debate. I think that both sides agree, or should be agreeing, that republicanism should be the step immediately after independence. The office of head of state, which was out of the reach of Barbadians, that has drawn a bit closer to us now, that office. A Barbadian can be head of state by birth, it says in the bill, or by descent. One thing I noticed there, though, is that no sitting member of the Senate or the House of Assembly can be immediately the president, because there has to be a cooling off period of 6 months, as the legislation says, from active politics. And no, before it becomes a reality. And the truth is, when I was thinking about it, I said, I believe the reason is that, you may have someone who has made a raw political statement just a few days ago or something, and it wouldn't cut such a good show if that same. In fact, at one stage it was saying, like, we feel more comfortable with a year rather than 6 months. But I understand the point why they are making. But Mr. President, I think I've said a lot, and I want to assure Barbadians once again that they can feel very, very comfortable in the legal process which is being done for us to reach this where we have it. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Greenwich. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's always very difficult to rise to speak after the honorable member, Deputy President of the House. He is learned, he is wise, he's tempered, and he's measured. And I would want to associate myself with his sentiments and with his legal explanations of the context of the basis of this bill. I, in particular, am encouraged by his elucidation of the legal formulation for this bill as it relates to those that have assessed the legality of what is being done, the process by which that is being undertaken, and I too would wish to rise or fall, sink or swim in the company of those to whom he has referred. Mr. President, I am not a legal mind, and so therefore I cannot frame my comments in the way that the honorable member has done. And so I wish to associate myself in this instance with those who have spoken on the principle that has brought us here before. Mr. President, I was a little girl, and I remember my father wanted me at the time to study law. And for the most parochial and silly reasons, I declined as a young girl. And here is the reason why, Mr. President. I, as a young girl, was vehemently opposed, without having an exposure to my history or my ancestry, but instinctively I was opposed to the notion of gesticulating before a foreign leader. I was opposed to the notion of wearing wigs and gowns and those kinds of things. And I was opposed at the time, Mr. President, because I did not think it identified with me. And I start there, Mr. President, because that young girl then made determinations about what courses of study she would take based on her orientation. And I remember being a proud student of Trevor G. Marshall's famous or infamous, depending on how you see it, history room at the Barbados Community College. Esther Phillips, poet laureate for Barbados, her English, Literatures of English class at the BCC, and as she was then called, Mr. Brousseur's politics class. Those were my 3 A-level subjects, Mr. President. And I'm going to go back there in order to frame the context for my argument. And I'm going to start, first of all, with a writer who was introduced to me at the time. He became one of my subsequent favorite writers, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And many people know him for his seminal work, A Grain of Wheat. But I'm using today a book called The Decolonization of the Mind. And I start there, Mr. President, as that little girl, and I use this quote from The Decolonization of the Mind. It is a review of that. It says, after 25 years of independence, which is at the time of the writing of the book, there is beginning to emerge a generation of writers for whom colonialism is a matter of history and not direct personal experience. In retrospect, that literature characterized by Ngugi as Afro-European, the literature written by Africans in European languages, will come to be seen as part and parcel of the uneasy period between colonialism and full independence, a period equally reflected in the continent's political instability as it attempts to find its feet. Mr. President, I, that little girl, was far divorced from a period of colonialism. I was not an independence baby, as was spoken about in the Prime Minister and the other place in her own address. I came well after that. But even though I was divorced from the actual lived history of my ancestry, instinctively, my own sense of self did not align me with notions of our governance system, and I rejected it. The second piece that I want to use to frame my comments, Mr. President, is by the noted laureate from Barbados, George Lamming, in his work In the Castle of My Skin. In The Castle of My Skin, George Lamming, on writing of it himself, he says this: "Much of the substance of my first novel, In the Castle of My Skin, is an evocation of this tragic innocence. Nor was there at the time of writing any conscious effort on my part to emphasize the dimension of cruelty that had seduced or driven Black people into such lasting bonds of illusion. It was not a physical cruelty indeed. In fact, the colonial experience of my generation was almost wholly without violence. It was a terror of the mind, a daily exercise in self-mutilation, Black versus Black, in a battle for self-improvement. This was the breeding ground for every uncertainty of self." That is George Lamming writing on the context of In the Castle of My Skin. Today, Mr. President, in 2021, we are still in that perpetual battle. We are still battling with the questions of why, who, if, when, and at what time is the right time. I am going to attempt to go through what some of the questions are that have been raised by Barbadians and in the public on the question of why a Barbadian president, why the direction of republicanism, and why not now versus later. And I'm going to anchor that, Mr. President, in the notion of self-mutilation and a battle for self-improvement. And I'm also going to make the argument, Mr. President, that a lot of what is coming out of the debate so far is rooted in what George Lamming refers to as an uncertainty of self. Mr. President, what has brought us to this point? We've had slavery, there's been amelioration. We don't talk much about amelioration. We talk largely about slavery and emancipation, but amelioration came in between. We then have independence, and in the post-independence period, we have now what we have evolved. I think the honorable member, when he spoke about the optimum time for republicanism having been in the 1970s, we are well beyond there, and we're still now having this conversation. The Ford Commission, which did its work in the latter part of the 1990s, made it very clear what the public of Barbados felt and what those who were consulted felt about the process of self-governance. We are now in 2020 awaiting the results of a number of bodies of work that are being done for the first time in decades. Those bodies of work include the report of the Thorne Commission, which speak about local governance. They include the work, Mr. President, of the upcoming Constitutional Commission, which we know is going to be chaired, which will begin in January. And they also will speak for the first time on parliamentary reform. What is our image of ourselves? What is our self-identity? And about what are we uncertain? What were the issues of the day, Mr. President, as we navigated the journey from slavery through independence and post-colonialism and post-independence? The primary issues then, Mr. President, were human conditions, living standards, human development, housing, education, the provision of adequate and efficient social services, inclusion versus exclusion, integration, and ultimately, what is our place in the world? Mr. President, those are still issues that we're navigating today. Many of us are still navigating how we see ourselves as a result of that socialization over our history, and how we make decisions today. Mr. President, when we have a conversation today about living conditions, there are still too many Barbadians who are living in conditions that are beneath what we expect. And as an administration, that is why you have the Minister with responsibility for housing having to take significant responsibility for ensuring that people are able to live with dignity. Because there has to be that certainty of self among the governed in 2021. There is no time better than now, Mr. President, to bring ourselves to a stage of being and living and existing and governing where we are looking after the salient issues of the day and allowing our people to evolve over time from where they began. Education, Mr. President, we know that that's a bugbear for me. Before I was in a member of this place, I've said publicly on a more one-on-one occasion that our education system needs to be completely collapsed and started reformed again. I make no apologies for saying that. Why do I say that, Mr. President? The system historically, as it was before, was designed to alienate a few and alienate many and empower a few. Mr. President, the system as it was designed created leadership, the leader class, the servant class, and in some instances, the unemployed class. We're still dealing with those issues today, and this administration has given a clear signal that for the first time equally in decades, this is something that we are dealing with. It has not been dealt with before. Much like so many other issues, including the very question of republicanism. Education is something that this administration is not delaying for later. We have to do it now because all of these issues, pandemic or pandemic not, still affect the evolution of a people from where they started, Mr. President. Inclusion and integration, there's still so many people, Mr. President, who do not feel as though they have a place in our society, who feel as though they don't belong anywhere. They're still on the periphery. How is that different from those who went before us, who felt on the outside looking in at society, at Master's house? How do those things affect our positions on crime and our positions on violence? How do we tie social services and social inclusion to the issues of exclusion, crime, violence, and deviant behavior? Those are issues now, Mr. President, that have always been issues from before, and they're being dealt with by this administration because the urgency of now is here. Mr. President, we ultimately have also had to deal with who we are in the world. And that is where I come to the legacy of Errol Walton Barrow, the father of our independence. Each time I hear reference to Errol Walton Barrow, I hear a couple of catchphrases. Friends of all, satellites of none. Absolutely true. What is your mirror image? Absolutely true. But I suggest and I recommend it as compulsory reading for every person who is genuinely committed to national development to read the speech in its entirety. If you read Errol Walton Barrow's mirror image speech in its entirety, it is something that was relevant then, and you're realizing that the salient issues of the day then are still the salient issues of the day now. And I'm going to read for a moment from that speech, just to bring it into context. Mr. President, he said, there's another small country, which is run by a friend of mine. That country has 210 square miles. It is 40 square miles bigger than Barbados. If you took the parish of St. Philip, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and put it right in the curve by Bashaba, that would be the size of the country of Singapore. And we hear a lot about the Singapore example even in here, Mr. President, but Errol Walton Barrow spoke about it in his mirror image speech. And he said, but you know the difference between Barbados and that country? Barbados has 250,000 people. You know how many more people Singapore has on 40 more square miles? Over 2.5 million on an island just a little larger than Barbados. And he went on to say, they don't have sugar plantations. They don't have enough land to plant more than a few orchids on it, but it is one of the orchid centers of the world. He went on to talk about the education sector. He said they have developed an education sector, but they are teaching people things that are relevant to the 21st century. They're not teaching people how to weed by the road. They're in the advance of the information age. But you know the difference fundamentally between you and them? They have got a mirror image of themselves. They're not looking to get on a plane to go to San Francisco, too far away. The government doesn't encourage them to migrate. They have a mirror image of themselves. They have self-respect. They have a desire to move their country forward by their own devices. They're not waiting for anybody to come and give them handouts, and so there's no unemployment. Is that the mirror image you have of yourselves? And then he did what we would call in modern context, he dropped the mic. He says, anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, I done. And that was where he ended the speech. Mr. President, the mirror image speech, all that time ago, is still relevant today. What are we doing by our hands and by our own efforts and by our own contribution to policy development to take our country forward? That is what he's asking of us. And if today, with the appointment of a new president of Barbados being passed through this place, we are hopeful, and agreeing on the fact that going forward and hitherto forth, that we will have a Barbadian head of state, it is unfathomable for me, Mr. President, to understand how we could possibly be flying in the face of Errol Walton Barrow himself, because if you read the entire mirror image speech, he is calling on us in many ways to move to the next level and to address those salient issues of the day, and to come to a stage where we, by our own hands, not external hands, by our own hands, develop policies and have a governance system and mechanism in place, political governance systems in place, by our own hands, which takes our country forward. That, Mr. President, is why we are here today. That, Mr. President, is why this bill is important. That, Mr. President, is the basis on which our discussions should be elevated with the dignity that the previous speaker made reference to, and not the loose colloquialisms that perhaps can contextualize some of our discussions, most unfortunately, and are perhaps not well suited to this place, to the dignity of this place. But that is where we are, Mr. President. So where do we have to go from here? We have a lot of work to do, Mr. President, on our mirror image, on how we see ourselves and how we are able to justify or oppose the appointment of a president. And why do I put it in that way, Mr. President? This is not about my daughter, who is a little older than Senator McConaughey's, well, a lot older than Senator McConaughey's, because my 22-year-old is fairly clear in her mind that we're in a different time and space than a 13-year-old would understand. But, Mr. President, that generation still does not understand the real issues that we're dealing with at this point. That generation doesn't quite get it still. But that's not who we're dealing with, Mr. President. A lot of times when we hear this conversation, we have rightfully the ambition that young girls and young boys in the future are in a position to say, I want to be the head of state. But, Mr. President, there are so many among us still who are battling with that uncertainty of self. There's so many who are, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o said, still battling that terror of the mind, who still don't have that certainty of who they want to be and where they want to take that country, where they want to take our country forward, Mr. President. So before we get to our young people who will come later, there has to be a considerable process of education, re-education, socialization, and re-socialization of the people among us now whose voices are being given agency by way of a microphone, who are not adding value to the conversation or to the elevation of those who have the ability to make decisions and who are contributing to the conversation now, but in fact are contributing to the opposite and are taking us back into an era where we ought to have evolved from now, by now. We have an era of social media, Mr. President, where people don't have to have merit in what they're saying. They just need to sit behind the anonymity of a computer, or a member of the press just needs to put a microphone in their faces, and the very first wild thing that flies to their head rushes out through their mouths, and it gets carried everywhere by social media and by the traditional press. And that which is repeated often is what then becomes true. And unless we give people the confidence that the decisions that we're making to create a new presidency, to appoint she who deserves to be that first president to the role, and that we support that. As a people, we are not giving them the confidence, Mr. President. The last couple of days, I have had so many people who have called me 1,000,001 times asking me about a level 4 advisory for the United States. Mr. President, today I said to the press, I am unconcerned, honestly and sincerely, about what happens with level 4 advisories for the United States. The United States is a sovereign nation. It will make the decision for itself on what and how it wishes to do its business. And I have to respect that. We all must. But Mr. President, the United States, and looking for external validation, which will then affect tourism or not affect tourism, is not where we are in this moment, Mr. President. We have, by dint of our own hands and dint of our own efforts, to be very clear in our minds that our future is crafted by us. Our destiny and the actions that we take today will determine what happens to us. So let us be clear, Mr. President. The United States Travel Advisory is not going to stop travelers from coming to Barbados. Barbados going to republicanism is not going to stop travelers from coming to Barbados. The appointment of a president is not going to stop travelers from coming to Barbados. What is going to stop travelers from coming to Barbados is when they call a hotel or a villa to make a reservation and they are vaccinated, they're tested, and they're quarantined, and they're being told that they're being attended to by workers who are neither. That is a decision made by our hands. That's not external. That's internal, and that's global. What is our place in the world? What decisions are we making to craft our own future? We are also in a position, Mr. President, where every time, and I believe my colleague from the business community would have this experience, we have the opportunity to craft our own place in the world, Mr. President. We have a CARICOM single market and economy. Is Barbados as aggressive about that as we need to be, or are we complaining with an uncertainty of self about who else is taking advantage of it while we stay here and do very little to take advantage of it? Our uncertainty of self, which has been socialized into us for generations, is what has driven a lot of this conversation around, should we be a republic? Should we have a president? It is what drove the conversation on Privy Council versus the CCJ. It is what drove the conversation, even in the University of the West Indies, about whether or not we should continue with the Privy Council, or we should change the visitor as a Privy Council, or we should shift it to the CCJ. This uncertainty of self, can I do this for myself and by dint of my own hands and my own work? Mr. President, I have every confidence, as I close, that Barbados has the capacity to elect a president, and that the mechanisms by which that president is elected are designed not to reflect the current composition of this parliament or any other place. I am confident, Mr. President, that the 2/3 majority of both houses that is designed, that has been put into the bill, is reflective not of the current composition of the parliament, but of the need for us to ensure that however it is so constituted at any given point, that there is unanimity in the appointment of a person to the office of the president. We may want to use the opportunity to say all kinds of things loosely, but the facts are still there. There's no way that the entire parliament, the entire Senate, or the entire House can pass any bill without a 2/3 majority, and including all sides. It is not possible, Mr. President. The government does not have the ability, even with a majority as it has now, to pass anything through the Houses of Parliament without the support of others. That is a misleading and an unfortunate misrepresentation of the facts and what is in the bill, Mr. President. I am confident, as I close as well, Mr. President, that we have the capacity on November 30th, or any date that we as a people choose, to determine that we will celebrate not just our independence, but we will celebrate our ascendancy to the realm of republicanism, where we ourselves are governing not just at the political level, at the administrative level, but at the executive level as well, even if it is in the ceremonial sense, as is the presidency in Barbados. We have that certainty. I have that certainty that I would wish all of us to use our pulpits and our platforms responsibly. To raise concerns and questions, yes, but to do so responsibly, not loosely and in an inflammatory way. And to those who are supposed to be more learned and who should know better, not to support foolishness. Honestly, It is so disappointing, and I've watched it evolve over time. It has been disappointing to watch. Rather than forcing others to elevate with you, you have descended into the ground with them. That is unfortunate, Mr. President, and that is not what is required of this platform. It is not. We have a moment, Mr. President, that I am proud to be a part of. I was supposed to be off island this week on travel duty, but I had to make the decision that there was nothing more important for that little girl who chose not to pursue a career in something else because I wanted to be able to be here to vote yes. I support this bill, and to have my name added to the record of those who stood up today and said Barbados should have its first president in the year 2021. And with these words, Mr. President, I am obliged to you.
I thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Senator McConney.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the sitting now be suspended until 10 minutes to 3. Until 3 o'clock, I am told, I'm being encouraged by my honorable, other honorable colleagues here, until 3 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3 p.m. today.
Right.
Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. The ayes have it. The sitting stands suspended until 3 p.m. today.